Okay, roster and Enid, if you would. Tanner, are you there?
No.
Tanner's not there. Okay. Brooke,
Here.
Laura, did you make
Here.
it? You made it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did.
Did you drive a little fast?
A little bit.
Okay. Glad you made it. Kendra? No Kendra? Okay. Cecilia?
Here.
Xander?
There.
Okay. Journey?
Here.
And Kelsey?
Here.
Yeah. Kelsey, y'all ready to go?
Yes.
Not right now, but yeah. You might go ahead and work with Connie to get your presentation up and ready, and then we'll get to it here in a minute. Angie's here. Jamie. I hope this isn't out of line, but if you are a believer, you guys might pray for Kayla. Okay? She's the woman that sits right up here. She could use some prayers right now. Cherie. Josh. Josh is supposed to present today, so I hope he's just running late. Tiffany, Adrian, Scott, Kevin, Cody, Milton. Nick is at a job interview. Can you believe that? A job interview is more important than my class. Just money, yeah. A lot of college students need money since when? Yeah. Okay. Weston, did you come in and Ponca?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And whenever he says go, you go. You can have my feet on it.
Okay. Hey, Quay, are you guys seeing the presentation, the story of Moses on your screen over there?
No, we see you.
Okay. All right. We may still have to do a little juggling. It's showing up over here, which is great, but we'll try to get it on your screen here in just a moment, too.
Change it.
Hey, you switch to it.
Okay, 'cause I mean, if you can see it.
Who's not seeing it, you see,
The UC, correct.
then they need to push their button.
It really depends on what system they have.
We don't know what system they have.
I mean, if it's identical to ours,
Hey, Quay, you want to experiment a little bit with that monitor up at the front of the room?
Okay. Go ahead, listen.
There should be somewhere on there a toggle switch that'll say, I mean, it's just a touch screen, but it'll say either local, remote, or what else might it say?
Ours says present over here.
Present, yeah.
What about show content?
Yeah, that might work. Try pushing it and see what happens.
No. Nothing happened.
Okay. Is there like a local remote button, Weston? Something that,
I can just go get Salma.
oh, yeah, okay, that'd be probably best, yeah. Just tell her that you're looking at a presentation from Enid and need to get it moved over. Okay. Uh-oh.
it's the same.
Now we just lost it here, so
Because they're the same buttons that I don't see here.
Did you lose us, Dr. Stinson?
and we lost it. We had it there for a minute, but now we're gone. Let me try. Yeah, okay, we got it back over here. It'd be so much easier if all of the classrooms had the exact same equipment. That's part of the confusion always. I think we have two main types of systems, but what do I know?
Here, Dr. Stinson.
Do what?
Salma's here to help.
Okay, thanks, Selma.
You're welcome.
It's a beautiful, very dramatic slide showing God and Moses parting the Red Sea, and it says the story of Moses down at the bottom.
Have you seen Exodus, any movie?
I haven't seen it yet. No, Gods and Kings. Yeah. I enjoyed the Noah movie. I know a lot of people didn't because they added so much to it, but I thought it was entertaining, you know. I didn't expect a Hollywood film to be biblically accurate per se, you know. I mean, just thought it got the gist of it. Okay, thanks. Yeah, yeah. I thought it was a pretty entertaining movie, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she's the only one missing, yeah.
Well, you're not here to take your.
No, I was. I took it late though.
Oh, okay.
You may not have read it yet.
Yeah, okay, I haven't got yours back yet.
Mine's a little too short for him.
It'll work though, I'll take it.
Hey Kathy, got a presentation from Enid, and we're seeing it here in Tonkawa, but not the UC. Any suggestions? He's in Enid. She's in Enid, yes. Okay, no comment, but
We're good.
Alright, we got it.
oh, hang on, they got it now. Yeah, so we're good. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, yeah, we have another one from here in Tonkawa, so, all right, thanks. Bye. Okay, I think we're good. Kelsey, take it away.
Okay, so I did my presentation over the story of Moses. Moses was a former Egyptian prince, later turned prophet, religious leader, and lawgiver to whom the authorship of the Torah is traditionally attributed. He is the most important prophet in Judaism. He is also an important prophet in Christianity and Islam, as well as a number of other religions. Moses led the exodus of the Israelites out of Egypt and across the Red Sea, after which they based themselves at Mount Sinai, where Moses received the 10 Commandments. It all started when Moses was a baby boy. The new king who came to power said the Israelites had become far too numerous and thought they would take over Egypt. So the Pharaoh gave the order to all his people, every Hebrew boy that is born you must throw into the Nile, but let every girl live. Moses' mother hid him for 3 months, but when she could not hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch. Then she placed Moses in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. Moses' sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slave to get it. She opened it and saw the baby, Moses. He was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Then Moses' sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" Moses' sister went and got their mother, and she got to nurse her own baby and got paid to do it. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his own people were and watched them at their hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Moses killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When Pharaoh heard of this, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh. During this time, Moses ran away. The Lord appeared to him in a blazing fire out of a bush. The Lord spoke to Moses and said that he has come down to rescue the Hebrew people from the Egyptians and bring them to a mighty land. Moses didn't understand why God was using him to do this. God said, "I will be with you." Moses returns to Egypt. The Lord had said to Moses, "Go back to Egypt, for all those who wanted to kill you are dead." So Moses took his wife and his sons and put them on a donkey and started back to Egypt. And he took the staff of God in his hand. Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, when Pharaoh says to you, perform a miracle, then say to Aaron, take your staff and throw it down before Pharaoh, and it will become a snake. Then the Lord said to Moses, now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of his country. God sent a plague of blood, frogs, gnats, flies, livestock, boils, hail, locusts, and darkness. The Pharaoh would still not let the Hebrew go, even after God had sent all 9 plagues. God then spoke to Moses, telling him he was going to send the worst plague of all, which was to kill every firstborn male out of Egypt. This included the own Pharaoh's son to be killed because he was a firstborn. After this, Pharaoh let the Hebrew people go. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, what have we done? We have let Israel go and we have lost their services. So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Then the Lord said to Moses, raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left.
With this staff, you shall do my wonders.
That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the mighty hand of the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses his servant. The Hebrew people to this day now celebrate Passover, which is the Jewish holiday in the spring that celebrates God's deliverance of the Hebrews from slavery in Egypt during the time of Moses. Unleavened bread called matzah is baked to symbolize the bread prepared and eaten in haste before the Hebrew slaves escaped from Egypt. The other dishes of food in the meal symbolize the slaves' work with bricks and their tears shed because of the harsh treatment they were put through from the Egyptian people. This is a day you are to commemorate. For the generations to come, you shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance. This is a cedar plate that they used for Passover. The roasted egg is a symbol or symbolized as a new life after Egypt. The parsley, a spring vegetable and sign of new life. The set, a mix of apples, cinnamon, nuts, and wine. The mortar used making bricks and slaves. The salt water symbolizes the tears of the slaves. The lamb bone, the sacrifice on the last night. And then the bitter times as slaves. And then the matzah is the unleavened bread, as there were no time in Egypt. There was no time in the escape to let it rise. Then this is Exodus 12. This is the day you are to commemorate for the generations to come. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance. For 7 days you are to eat bread made without yeast. On the first day remove the yeast from your houses, for whoever eats anything with yeast in it from the first day through the 7th must be cut off from Israel. Celebrate the festival of unleavened bread, because it was on this very day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as lasting ordinance for the generations to come. Obey these instructions as a lasting ordinance for you and your descendants. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you as he promised, observe this ceremony. And when your children ask you, what does this ceremony mean to you? Then tell them, it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of Israelites in Egypt and spared our homes when he struck down the Egyptians. And then that's it.
Okay, questions or comments for Kelsey from anywhere? Anyone? Okay. Okay, let's try to switch things back over to here and see if we can get it set up for get over here. Okay, are you, Quay, Weston, you guys seeing me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. All right. Hang on just a little bit. Couple of things I thought of as I'm going to have to switch the computer for just a little bit. For some reason, it won't show up on my other monitor until there it comes. Never mind. Okay. Couple of things I thought of. One is the fact that has always struck me a little curious, given those of us that are Christians, of course, look at the New Testament and its constant admonitions against violence, against killing, even in Jesus' words, against being angry with our neighbor. And yet here we have Moses, one of the most revered figures in Judaism and in Christianity and in Islam, who kills a man, right? And very little is made of that. And I've always thought that was interesting. I mean, you can argue it wasn't exactly self-defense. He saw the man beating a fellow Hebrew, but so I've always found that curious, right? I'm not saying that shouldn't have qualified Moses for special status. It just it's an interesting point that usually just gets glossed over. I think the fact that he did commit a murder, and that arguably was not necessary.
Not everyone in all the stories has had their flaw.
Yeah, definitely. Jesus even got so mad at a tree once he cursed it and killed it, which is another, that's an interesting story to me in the Gospels because, even he blew his cool on two occasions. One was the money changers in the temple, which makes sense because it was also a lesson, but the other time was just this poor tree that didn't have a ripe fruit, and he just kind of goes, and the tree dies, and thought, okay, that's a very human reaction, right? Yeah. Very interesting. Okay. Cherie, do you have yours on flash drive, or do you want I'll just pull it up here. It'd probably be easier. I've already got it on Blackboard, so give me just a second here. And I'll turn the tables over to you. Yeah, the whole Prince of Egypt movie. I liked that movie a great deal. I thought it was well done. Was that Disney or Pixar? Who did that? Anybody?
It was DreamWorks.
DreamWorks. Okay, that's right. Yeah, it was one of the big studios. But I couldn't remember which one. Yeah, I thought it was really well done. Very entertaining, and certainly, like a lot of those movies, accessible for both children and adults. And very good film. Okay, Cherie Carrier is going to be presenting on communion and baptism from here in Tonkawa. Let me move some of my junk out of the way so that she can have some room here. Come on up, Cherie. Camera's going to be on you right now, so if you want it on you, that's fine. Yeah, if you want it on the computer, just push that big blue present button. Press it again. Okay, has everyone seen the communion and baptism slide now?
Yes,
We already did.
Okay, good. All right. Take it away, Cherie.
I'm Cherie. I'll be talking about communion and baptism and how they correspond together in some terminology. I'm starting off with a video for communion first. Oop, wrong one. Is there volume?
Just pause it for a minute.
Communion first started with Passover with Moses, and it was said that angel of death was to kill the first Egyptian boy, and you mark the doors to let angel of death know that you're a hero by marking it with blood. When Jesus Christ came in with the New Testament, he had his Last Supper with his 12 disciples. And, it was performed right before he was captured. I'm skipping. It was with the bread and the broken body, wine and the blood. This was right before he was betrayed by Judas. And it was the reason why everyone does communion is so we could be one with Christ, as the video said. with Christ. And then, so with that going on with the whole communion, do you also have the baptism part? But in order to, I have scriptures for this one, so it'll be a lot easier for me. In Matthew 26 through 28, it said, while they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, take and eat, this is my body. Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. He was saying this to, no matter, like when he was being crucified, it was so that you would remember like what he has done for them on this earth and why he has given himself in place of your sins. Luke 22:19 through 20 said, and he took the bread and gave thanks and broke it and gave it to them, saying, this is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And as it said in Matthew, he did the same thing for the cup, and the blood is to be poured out for you. The communion examines and pray. That's how you do is like you examine and pray, take and eat, and take and drink. And you have to be, in order to do it, you have to be in the right mindset, just like you would do baptism or anything, which is where both of them correspond together. And so that being said, I'm going to go straight to baptism.
Baptism is symbolic of what Jesus did for us in his death, burial, and resurrection. Being lowered in the water represents our old life dying. Just like Jesus was dead and buried, who we were and what we've done is dead. Our past and future sins are forgiven. When we were raised out of the water, we are reminded our new life is made possible because of Jesus' resurrection. We are a new creation. Today, we celebrate as people take their next step and tell the world how Jesus has brought them from death to life. We celebrate because they have a new life in Jesus. They have been made brand new. They are forgiven. They are a new creation.
Baptism, the definition of it is the death of the old self being brought up from the water into a new life through the walk of God. This is the symbolizing of making yourself anew, getting rid, and making a stance saying you will follow the Lord. The 3 ways to practice this is through sprinkling, which this is usually done when you're a baby. Usually your parents have to say, and they take you, and the pastor or the priest would take you and sprinkle water on your head. And it's not until you reach like your teenager years and adulthood where you then decide to get immersed into the water, like the video was showing. And I read about the pouring. The pouring is basically having the Holy Spirit poured out over you. So you will be like, you're the person to follow the Lord, and you represent that. I did, for the scriptures for baptism, it says in Luke 16:16, he said, whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. In Acts 2:38, it was repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of your sins, and you will receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. I think for these 2 scriptures, it was saying that, come follow me, and and believe what I have given you for being crucified. And so I feel like with baptism and communion, you can't, people say you have to do one or the other, and I think it's more of, in either way, they correspond together so that you're like on the right path with the Holy Father. And that's my end of my slide presentation.
Okay, questions for Cherie or comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
What do you think, outsiders, or not outsiders, but people out of Christianity, how do you think they might view, baptism as far as either within their own religion or own mindset?
Cherie? She's pondering. Anyone else?
I think honestly, outside of Christianity, I think from learning from all these other religions, they have some sort of.
I can't really hear you.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
I think honestly, while I'm learning through all these other religions, they have some correspond of trying to figure out and be strong in their religion, same way as to be strong in Christianity. It's the next step into your faith would be baptism. I think other religion has kind of the same terminology, but it's always called something totally different from what I've been learning. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Good job.
Good job.
Yeah, I might point out also Judaism, converting to Judaism involves ritual bathing too. They don't usually use the word baptism, but I know at one stage of the process you go into a pool of sacred water, right? So there is an analogy in Judaism. If you're converting, say, from Christianity to Judaism or Islam to Judaism or whatever, there is water involved. I don't know of any such thing in Islam. And the one thing I would say too, I mean, to those of us that were raised as I was Church of Christ or raised Southern Baptist, we were taught that dunking was the only acceptable baptism, you know. And that, of course, has not always been church practice. Sprinkling and pouring have been commonly used, as you pointed out. And when you think about the area of the world where Christianity originated in the arid Middle East, I'm not sure that, that they wouldn't probably have built special tanks for baptism. We see St. John, of course, baptizing, presumably by immersion in the River Jordan, including baptizing Jesus. But I think in Saudi Arabia, of course, where Islam originated, a very arid country, pouring water probably would have been considered a sacrilege, because every drop of water was so precious. I don't know of any allegory to baptism in Islam, and I don't think of it really in relation to Buddhism per se. As we've seen in Hinduism, though, what do devout Hindus like to do? Well, lots of things, but yeah. Well, ask a broad question, get a deer in the headlights look, yeah. There's one thing you often see photos of Hindus doing in India, though, that involves water. What is it? Yeah, the Ganges, right? It's a special thing because they consider the river sacred. Yeah. So you'll often see these photos of mass numbers of Hindus bathing in the Ganges, yeah.
Travel there sometime in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like the Hajj in Islam, where Muslims have to go to Mecca at least once during their lifetime, and it's the same idea. with Hindus, they're expected to go bathe in the river Ganges at least once if they can. So again, there's a connection with water in Hinduism, in Judaism, and in Christianity. None of them are quite baptism, but similar, right, to the idea of water. Why would water be such a potent symbol in religion anyway?
It's life.
Yeah. Without it, there's no life, right? So water is the most precious of elements and is going to become more so over the next few decades as population grows and the planet gets drier in some places. Yeah, we'll be reminded of that over and over again, right? The importance of water. I wanted to take over for a little while. I forgot announcements and everything. And Kelsey was so eager to go, I didn't want to make her wait any longer, but do have some clerical stuff to talk about. As far as things going on the two campuses, there are art exhibits now on both campuses that are available for extra credit. On the Enid campus, the faculty show that was hanging here is now in the Marshall building on the Enid campus. That's rooms 100 and 101, that art gallery area there in Marshall. And that will be up through May 4th. On the Tonkawa campus, the student art exhibit Aura opens today, and it will be up also through May 4th. Both of those, both the Enid gallery showing and the Tonkawa gallery showing, both open 1 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday afternoons. And of course, with the PAC here in Tonkawa, anytime there's a concert or a play or something, you could have the chance to see it there. I know in Marshall, there's at least 1 or 2 opportunities later this month when it'll be open during the evenings as well. But if you want to be sure to see either of those, 1 to 5 Monday through Friday afternoons. And again, if you write just a 1-page reaction to some of the pieces that you see there and send it to me, you can get 10 points extra credit. Philip, Scott, sorry. Oh, sorry, man, sorry.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay,
I just called him by his brother's name. So, yeah, sorry, Scott.
So I have proof in my car that I gave blood the other day.
Mhm.
Is that for extra credit?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Is that proof enough?
Yeah, I've got it. Like,
Oh,
right there.
God. You got the rookie nurse? Oh, ouch. If you're wondering what we're laughing about, Hunter just held up his arm to show he gave blood. He's got this ugly looking bruise. Looks like it might be infected or something, but yeah, hopefully not. He asked if that was proof enough, and I said he must have gotten the rookie nurse, so yeah. That looks bad. There was home baseball scheduled for today. I assume that got rained out in Enid. Tomorrow, Lieutenant Governor Todd Lamb will be speaking here on the Tonkawa campus at 2 p.m. Lieutenant Governor Lamb has an interesting story. He's from Enid originally, Enid native. He, I think, lives in Edmond now. He served in the Secret Service during both the Clinton and George W. Bush presidencies, so he guarded both President Clinton and President Bush as a Secret Service agent. He was in the Secret Service on September 11th, 2001, when the U.S. was attacked by Al-Qaeda. He worked for Homeland Security briefly, well, kind of a liaison between Secret Service and Homeland Security as the Bush administration was scrambling, trying to figure out how to put together a more a detailed, national security plan. He came back to Oklahoma and served 2 terms in the Oklahoma House of Representatives and is now in his 2nd term as Lieutenant Governor of Oklahoma. I would bet even money he'll be a candidate for governor in 2018 when Mary Fallon's 2nd term ends. He has spoken. He was our commencement speaker a couple of years ago, I think. He's a very eloquent guy and interesting. I don't know what he's going to be talking about. I assume he'll be addressing some of the hot topics in Oklahoma politics right now, the budget crisis caused by the downturn in energy prices, the layoffs in the energy sector, obviously a need to grow jobs in the state again to keep the growth that we've had going, the impact on education and other vital state services of the declining tax base. I have no idea what he's going to talk about, but I'm sure it'll be relevant to some of the issues that we face here in this part of Oklahoma as well as across the state. So that's 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon in the gym. And if you go to hear Lieutenant Governor Lamb's comments, you could write a one-page reaction to that for 10 points extra credit. NOC Olympics, unfortunately, are scheduled at the same time tomorrow. I don't know if any of you are involved in that. That involves students from both the Enid and Tonkawa campuses, and they get together here on the Tonkawa campus and compete against each other in a variety of activities, including volleyball and tug of war and other things, and try to get bragging rights as the jockiest campus, I guess, or something. That'll be going on tomorrow afternoon, presumably if it doesn't get rained out at the same time Governor Lamb or Lieutenant Governor Lamb is speaking. Let's see, that's it for first part of the week, I guess. Today's cartoons. Since I flew last week, I enjoyed this. Yeah. Transportation Security Agency. If you had to watch people shuffle by 8 hours a day without the slightest hope of coming across anything important, you'd hassle someone over a half-empty bottle of mouthwash now and then, too. Yeah, it's one of those jobs that must be incredibly boring, but if you screw up one time, the results could be catastrophic, right? Yeah, oh, yeah. That's Dan Pizarro. He always works in pie or an eyeball or a little spacecraft.
There is an eyeball.
Yeah, he has these little objects that he's apparently obsessed with, and he works them into a lot of cartoons. Enlightenment sounds okay, but I've decided to go with willful ignorance instead. Like probably 70% of the American public. This is, I thought, funny. The stereotypical fat cat CEO here, right, with his fine scotch, single malt, no doubt, and his fancy cigar, talking to his daughter. When you say it is responsible for environmental destruction, climate change, and the erosion of the middle class, it hurts Daddy's corporation's feelings. And then you got to look at the sign in the window. Whiskey and painkillers disguised as pie and coffee. How is this not a national franchise? And I know some of you probably have family members or friends that have struggled with alcoholism or painkiller addiction, which is pretty common in Oklahoma, but it's still funny, you know. Yeah. All right. I ran across this. Some of you may have seen this. There was results of a new study on religion worldwide released, and this is from NPR, National Public Radio website. New survey shows the world's most and least religious places. I highlighted just the main takeaway from it. 63% of people who took part in a global survey of religious attitudes say they are religious. 63%. So this is worldwide, right? So a solid majority of human beings claim to be religious, right? But maybe not as many as you might expect, right? The poll was done by WIN and Gallup International. 22% of the people worldwide who were said they were not religious. Okay, 11% said they were convinced atheist. Okay? And this poll surveyed nearly 64,000 people in 65 countries all around the world, right? So 63, this adds up to 99% if you do the math, right? I'm not sure about the other 1%, confused. But 63% were religious, 22% not religious, 11% convinced atheists, right, was how it broke out. They found that Africa, and I've never seen this acronym before, MENA, it basically means Middle East, North Africa. I don't know if that's a real thing or they just made it up for the story. But Africa and the Middle East and North Africa were the most religious areas, with more than 80% of respondents in that area saying they consider themselves religious. And then there's a map that shows the 3 most religious areas to be Morocco and Northwest Africa, and then the area just east of Turkey, which would be some of the stans, I think, right, in the old Soviet Union, places like Uzbekistan maybe, or some of those places. So yeah, you saw that area as marking the most religious. Obviously, many of the countries throughout the Middle East would rate very high, especially places like Saudi Arabia and Iran, probably. Afghanistan, I imagine, would be pretty high, and some of the North African countries as well. Right? In the United States, 56% of people describe themselves as religious. And again, that doesn't include that category of not religious, which is separate from the atheist category, right? So some people might interpret the question, I assume, to mean that they don't go to church or they don't, read the Bible or whatever it might be. But 56%, when asked, are you religious or not, said that they were. So again, a majority, but only a slight majority, and lower than the 63% worldwide, right? Western Europe and Oceania were the only regions where about half of those surveyed said they were either not religious or were convinced atheists. As I mentioned before, in some parts of Scandinavia, like Sweden or places like that, you get about 50% atheists or non-believers, so one of the highest rates. And this shows a couple of places, 2 places that scored very high on the non-religious. One of them is not surprising. This is in Sweden. But look where the other one is. You know what that is? Zoom in on it here. Where is that? Geography? Challenge to people, I know, but it is the Holy Land.
Are you serious?
That's Israel. Yeah.
Oh, okay, right.
A lot of Jews are not religious. The Holocaust, I mean, a lot of people that talk about Judaism and religion will point out that the Holocaust destroyed the faith of many Jews. I mean, they, have been reassured that they were God's chosen people, and then 6 million of them are exterminated systematically, right? And so many older Jews, the children sometimes of Holocaust survivors, etc., will tell you that they just could not continue to believe in God after the Holocaust. It was a deal breaker for them. And Jews also tend to be, as a group, very highly educated, and there is a somewhat, it's not exact, there are many highly educated religious people, but in general, the more educated people become, the more likely they are to be non-religious, right? So a couple of factors there. But yeah, Israel actually ranks as a pretty non-religious country, even though many of the country's members obviously are pretty devout Jews. So, in Judaism, they also distinguish between sort of religious Judaism and cultural Judaism, right? A lot of people that are proud of being Jewish and they follow Jewish customs, but they don't really do it as a serious religious thing. It's more of a cultural identity type of thing, right? But yeah, that leapt out. Another thing that leapt out to me, because you hear it said all the time that in the United States, young people tend to be less religious than older people. And I've heard that and read that so often that I kind of internalized that. But that's not necessarily true worldwide. They found that people under the age of 34 tend to be slightly more religious than those from other age groups. So worldwide, younger people seem to be more religiously inclined. Those without an education are the most religious. 80% of people who are uneducated are religious, though the religious are a majority among all educational levels, right? So yeah, some interesting recent data. I know I'd shared some older data with you, but I thought that was interesting. So the U.S., 56% religious. Another stat I saw recently based on current demographic trends and conversion trends, 2070, guess what is projected to happen in 2070?
The end of the world.
That's projected to happen every year, yeah, but 2070.
I feel like Judaism's not going to be within the top 5 anymore.
Yeah, it's quite possible. What about at the top? According to religious scholars who track demographic trends, birth rates, and conversion patterns, around 2070, Islam will pass Christianity as the largest religion in the world. Yeah. Now, that, again, that's just guesswork based on current trends, right? But if current trends continue in terms of birth rate and conversion patterns, then around 2070, Islam will become the largest religion in the world, and Christianity will become the second largest religion. So I thought that was interesting as we begin this unit on Islam, just to point that out. Okay, if you would open up your books to today's reading assignment, which starts on 335, right? And we'll start by looking at some numbers. I do quite a bit of audio-visual stuff during the Islam unit. Generally, it'll be rushed to get it in with all the presentations this semester, but I like to bring in like some recordings of the calls to prayer, which can be quite beautiful, from the minarets and the person who goes up and issues the call to prayer 5 times a day at the prescribed times. I've got some videos of Mecca during the Hajj and Muslims marching around the Kaaba. Some really interesting stuff online, videos that we'll talk about in relation to what Muslims actually do in terms of practices, right? So you see the stats there worldwide. There are 1,523,212,000 Muslims, a little over 2 billion Christians. So Christianity is still the largest religion, at least until 2070 or so, right? And Islam, though, over 1.5 billion adherents, so obviously an incredibly large number. And when you look at the numbers below, obviously you see the biggest concentration in Asia, where over 1 billion of that total are located, right? This would include, they're lumping the Middle East in, of course, with Asia. But other parts of Asia, like Indonesia and Malaysia and places like that, have very large Muslim populations as well. And India has it's a minority within India, but that's still millions and millions of Indians that are Muslim, right? And then you have Pakistan, Afghanistan, etc. The second largest concentration, obviously, in Africa. Look at the difference between Europe and North America, too. Almost 8 times as many Muslims in Europe as North America. And when you think about the geographical size of the continent of Europe and of North America, much heavier Muslim presence in Europe, and of course that has resulted in relatively more tensions than you've seen in North America, right? We've had ugly incidents in the U.S., and I'm not just talking about terrorist attacks, but obviously anti-Muslim attacks and people targeting Muslims and things like that. But that kind of thing is much more common in Europe because there are so many more Muslims in Europe.
It's kind of a retaliation against people who didn't even do anything, but it's also like...
Yeah, it's a cultural clash. It really is, yeah. And the interesting thing, I don't want to get hung up on that, and because I really don't want to get hung up on the negative aspects of Islam, because, as Americans, we've had 20 or 30 years, 40 years of constant conflict with Muslim nations in the Middle East or Muslim terrorist groups and et cetera. And so we've definitely been conditioned by history and by media and by everything to sadly associate Islam with terrorism and violence. And we know rationally that most Muslims in the world, they're not violent, crazy terrorists, or the world would have been burnt to a cinder by now, given that it's over 1 billion people. But I would say that there is a cultural clash, because as Western Europe has been becoming less and less Christian, it's been becoming more and more Muslim, right? And one of the facts that leapt out at me a few years ago that really made me see that in a new light, in England. And this study was done quite a few years ago, maybe 7 years ago, something like that. In England now, there are more Muslims who attend mosque services on Friday than there are Christians who attend church on Sunday. in terms of total numbers, right? Yeah. So, yeah, actual numbers, right? There are actually more Muslims in mosque across England on any given Friday than you'll find Christians in churches across England on Sunday morning, right? So one thing that's happened, and the same thing could be true in France and Germany and throughout Western Europe, as Christianity has waned, I know some religious scholars refer to Europe as a post-Christian society, right? There's still millions of Christians there, but a lot of them are sort of Christians in name only. You know, they're baptized at church, they may get married at church, buried at church. Other than that, they may never go to mass or church, right? And whereas you've got this immigrant population of Muslims, and of course many of them are the same way. They're, you know, Muslim in name only maybe, but then among them you also have some that are quite devout, and within that number you have a small minority who are radical, right? And so the tensions are there, and it's led to, of course, the Charlie Hebdo attacks in Paris and other things, and then the backlash by especially right-wing groups against Muslim communities in Europe. So it's been much more of a flashpoint. In North America, by contrast, has been relatively calm. And interesting fact, though, about Muslims in the United States. Anybody know what state in the U.S. has more Muslims per capita than any other? The largest concentration of Muslims within the state? It's a, yeah, you'll be surprised, I think, by the answer. And I'm not sure why. I assume it's just early on some Muslim Americans came over from the Middle East somewhere and settled in this area, and then when others came over, they settled in this area. But it's not New York, it's not Los Angeles, it's not a dry desert place like we stereotypically associate the Middle East as being. Anybody want to guess? No, you're in the right area, though. It's Michigan. Yeah. The state of Dearborn, Michigan, which is a suburb of Detroit, has a really large Muslim population, right? And these Muslims come from many different countries, of course, in North Africa, the Middle East, etc. But it has one of the largest, now probably there are more numerically in California or New York, right? But per capita as a percentage of the, how did that happen? As a percentage of the population, yeah, it's higher there than anywhere else. So, yeah, just some interesting things to think about. One of the things I think it's always good to talk about, too, when we start talking about Islam is that when we look at the three related religions, okay, so we're going to look at the Abrahamic religions, right? Why are they called Abrahamic religions? Yeah. They all consider themselves sort of children of Abraham at some level, right? Now, Christians arguably less so, although we talk a lot about Abraham, but you know, in the sense of Christianity originating directly from Abraham, usually when we look at Old Testament figures, we talk more about David, for example, who was a direct ancestor of Jesus, according to the biblical genealogy, right? But we get the first, of course, which is Judaism. And then later, of course, we get Christianity. And then later we get Islam, right? And who knows, someday there may be another one. But right now, those are the three Abrahamic religions, right? Now, one thing to keep in mind about these three groups is that Judaism originates in the midst of time, right? Long time ago. It's a very old religion. And it emerges in resistance to the polytheism that was common throughout the Middle East at the time, right? The Jews insist that there's only one God, and they call it Yahweh, Jehovah, the great I Am, you know, various names. But there's one God, and he controls the world, and all the other gods are false gods, right? And of course, in the Old Testament, we see the constant struggle within Judaism, within the Hebrew people, between belief in their God and being tempted by the other gods of other peoples, right? What does Christianity, how does it relate to Judaism?
The Old Testament?
Well, okay.
I mean,
So both Judaism and Christianity claim the Old Testament, right? But do Christians just acknowledge the Old Testament? No. We add to that the New Testament, right? But basically, Christianity builds on Judaism by claiming to be essentially an update on Judaism, right? Because Christians recognize Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, as the Messiah that the Jews had been looking for. And they go back to the Old Testament and link passages in Isaiah and Daniel all throughout the Old Testament as being basically prophecies of Jesus, right? And so they connect the New Testament to the Old Testament. And in essence, Christianity can be seen as claiming to be an update or a later revelation to the Jewish people, right? And then thanks to St. Paul and others, it goes worldwide, right? And becomes a religion for anyone that believes that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and can save sins, right? So what does Islam have in connection with these other two older religions?
Kind of a lineage of breaking off between brothers.
Yeah. Ultimately traced back, right, to Isaac and to Ishmael, right? So with Judaism, and whereas in Christianity, I guess we would trace back to Isaac as well, since Christianity begins as kind of a Jewish cult and then expands beyond that. But yeah, there's that connection, right? The Quran talks about Abraham, it talks about Moses, it talks about David, it talks about John the Baptist, Jesus, who is the virgin birth is discussed, Jesus is considered a great prophet, etc. So Islam, in essence, as Christianity claimed to be sort of an update on Judaism, Islam claims to be kind of an update on both Judaism and Christianity, right? And in that sense, it's not, while it's a very different religion and considered a completely different religion, in a way it's not that different than something like Mormonism, right? Now, I know you don't know, maybe remember that much about Mormonism from the previous chapter, but like Muslims who revere the Quran as an authoritative text, Mormons recognize the Bible, but what else do they have? The Book of Mormon, right? And the Book of Mormon is given to Joseph Smith from God by an angel, right? And it, in essence, is a sort of update on the Bible, right? So, I mean, once I realized the parallels, and again, I'm not saying they're the same, they're totally different, right? And we're not talking about polygamy, because the Mormons banned that 100 years ago, right? Although those weird breakaway sects that still get in the news every once in a while. But,
isn't it the Mormons that say that their book is like one of the lost books that's been
yeah, there's that whole idea of the lost book and the lost tribe of Israel and all that. I don't know much about Mormonism. I have a couple of family members that converted to it, but I don't feel that I know enough about it to really speak to it. I've never read the Book of Mormon, so I don't know specifically what it says. But the only parallel I'm trying to make is just as Mormonism, the Book of Mormon claims to be kind of the latest news about the Judeo-Christian tradition. I think the Quran kind of tries to do the same thing, right? And again, that's an important point for us to keep in mind. Muslims are not in a totally different universe from Christians or Jews. They inhabit the same universe as Christians and Jews, right? And maybe because we're all related, that explains why we fight so much, right? Kind of like a dysfunctional family, you know, of cousins that can't get along in some cases. But yeah, Muslims, when you read the Quran, for the first time, you're surprised by how much of it is familiar, right? Because so many of the same figures occur as you find, particularly in the Old Testament, but also Mary is mentioned, Jesus is mentioned. There are a lot of things familiar to Christians as well. So these three religions are and have been throughout history since the 600s, right? Over 1,000 years, 1,400 years, very interconnected in different ways, right? Yeah. I say that again because I am aware, there's so much tension about Islam in the United States and in Western Europe and in other Christian or formerly Christian parts of the world, that it is good to remember that there are strong connections there, right? And have been connections historically throughout time. The author of your textbook kind of seems to be saying this, I think, at the bottom of 336, when he's talking about, it's the very last paragraph at the bottom of 336. The ensuing account tries to present the facts of history with respect for the Muslim views that Muhammad's actions, words, and teachings were inspired by his own religious experiences. Nevertheless, other forces interacted with his recitations of the Quran and his actions based on them. In the history of this religion, as I have with others, I try to present a sympathetic, understanding account of the religion's beliefs about its origin and development, right? And I think that's, he's sensitive, as I am, to all the reputation, the bad reputation Islam has in the United States and other countries around the world right now. And he doesn't want to play that up. He doesn't want to encourage that. He wants to try to present the facts while being sympathetic to the fact that, over 1 billion people on the world believe certain things are true of Islam that are not true of any other religion, right? He's basically done the same thing with every religion he's discussed in the book, but it seems like he goes out of his way maybe to make that point a little stronger here for obvious reasons, I think. One thing, too, to keep in mind, the cultural conditions in which Judaism first developed and in which Islam first developed were more alike than the cultural conditions in which Christianity first developed. Does that make any sense whatsoever? No? Okay. All right. Let me try that again. Okay. Christianity develops in the first century, right? Which, of course, wasn't the first century then, because Jesus Christ has been such an important figure, it is now. It develops at a time and in a culture that is pretty civilized and developed, right? It is a part of the Roman Empire, which is a strong international, empire ruled from Rome, but with a great deal of autonomy to regions within it. As long as they pay the Romans taxes and don't desecrate Roman temples, the Romans more or less leave them alone and let them practice their religions, etc. There are fairly high rates of literacy and mortality, not morality, mortality. People live longer, they're better educated. There are roads. Of course, the Romans were master builders, so you have good roads and bridges, public buildings. It was not a paradise by any means. It still included war and slavery and disease and all the other horrible things that have plagued humanity. But Christianity evolved basically as an urban religion in the power centers of the Roman Empire, right? If you go back to the history of Judaism and Islam, they developed among tribal nomads, right, in the deserts. Right? You see the difference? Right? And one of the explanations that's often given, and we're going to watch a video probably next time or the third day we do Islam, by a Muslim scholar who makes a very good argument that a lot of the things that we associate with Islam as being something Muslim people do are actually things that were done before there was even an Islam, right? They're ancient cultural practices that go back before the time of Muhammad, before the time of Islam as a religion, the people were doing these things when they were pagans, and then they continued doing them once they became Muslims, right? But we associate those things with Islam when they're actually cultural factors out of those regions. So one thing to keep in mind is that Muhammad grows up as basically a desert nomad warlord. He's illiterate, and that's not unusual for the culture he grows up in. He carries a sword and knows how to use it, right? And he has this revelation, right? And so he begins a religion that begins in a very different social framework than the religion of Christianity, right? So when we look at differences between Islam and between Christianity in particular, one thing to look at is where they evolved originally, right? And what the circumstances were for the beginnings of each. And I think it goes to a long ways toward helping to explain some of the differences between the two faiths. At least I hope it does. If not, I'm standing on breaking ice here, but I think it's one way to look at it for sure. Okay, we have presentations, just real quick, presentations on Thursday from someone. Do double check the schedule that's posted because I'm not able to put my finger on it right now, but the one that's posted on Blackboard right now has been revised a couple of times recently. So be sure you check it to make sure you know when you're presenting, right? I think the last time it was updated was last week, so. I can be, sure. Okay, I'll wait for you. Yes, sir. Yeah, I had the schedule with me. I can't figure out what I did with it. It should be on. Okay, I may have to because I cannot find the schedule right now. I know it should be here, but oh, here it is. I found it. Where do I have you down? I don't guess I have added you in yet. Probably it'll be the very last day, like Thursday, April 30th.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Sign that for me.
Oh, sure. You made it A on this last test? B? Yeah, but a high B, right?
An 88.
Yeah. I thought. Yeah, the same thing?
Yes, sir. Okay. Did you get my email Saturday? About the
I don't know, I was in Minnesota Saturday, I'm not sure.
presentation?
I think so. Let me make a note to myself to look. What'd you decide on?
I can't remember. I just remember because I went and looked at the list and I could never find a list
Okay.
of the remainder stuff, and then I did Saturday and I picked something.
Okay, I'll look for your email then. I just made a note. You're down for for Tuesday, April 28th.
Yeah.
But I'll check and see and then fill in with the topic. Dates of classes missed, okay. So January 27th. February 17th and 19th. You guys were at something then, weren't you?
17th.
They're both excused absences. You must have been
Yeah.
maybe showing then or
We
something.
had, that's probably one of them was a Noble County thing.
I say showing, judging, right?
Yeah, judging.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Sometimes they have us go help with little county fairs, and they'll tell us the difference.
Yeah, surprise, surprise, right? Yeah.
They're like, hey, you're leaving tomorrow. You're like, oh, okay.
And I'm just totally guessing about the actual grade, but it's A or a high B, so.
Yeah. Thank you very
B plus for rounding off. And you probably missed the exact same
Yeah.
days largely, didn't you? Yeah. So that's the 27th. There you go, Hunter. Yeah, you're both doing great, man. I'd love to have a whole classroom full like you guys. This class actually overall is pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, like when Miss Martin was telling me like the options for like names, and she said world religions, I thought that probably sounds more interesting than most of them.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's do that.
I'm glad you guys did.
Well, we enjoyed it.
Okay. So let me make a note here. $10 extra credit, Scott. Scott's blood.
And then I also turned in that paper for the play at the NOC.
Right. So that'll help you out, make up some points.
Cause I missed a test on that day, and I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, whatever happened, did you not ever you never made that up, did you?
No,
Yeah.
am I able to? I just thought if I missed, I'm not able to.
Well,
That's usually what every teacher has told me. If I miss a test, it's like,
I emailed you somewhere in there, and you may not have gotten the email or may not have checked your email, but I emailed you and.
which email was it? I have.
I don't know. It was whatever one that showed up on my.
Okay, gonna have to check my Yahoo then.
Yeah. Let me. But look and see if you find that email. Because yeah, I had taken a copy of the test over the testing center and had it over there where you could have gone and made it up. But I think she's already returned it because when you send them over, you say they can make it up between this date and this date. And it was like that week after.
Well, that's not bad.
Well, we'll see where you are grade wise, and then.
I think I'm good right now. I'm about to go home because at downtime my other classes.
Right.
I'm gonna do 4 journal entries because I've been behind, but I've just read up on my book.
Okay.
And also, I'm wondering if, because there's 2 other bonus things I'm about to do.
Right.
So that's 40 out of the 100 points made up
Okay.
right there.
So you can probably make up a lot of it.
Yeah, honestly, because like I'm going to the art gallery.
Right.
So I just write about what I've seen and like all that, or like.
Yeah, just a very informal. Hey, I really like this piece. I didn't understand. This
I got to
piece.
look at it a while back, so I've got an idea. And also.
You got an inside track, right?
Yeah. My girlfriend's one of the.
I was gonna say Phoenix probably has a bunch of stuff in there, doesn't she? Yeah.
Her sunflower picture is amazing.
She's great. Yeah.
She is really good.
Yeah. I had her in
She's
class as a student. I enjoyed her as a student, but her art is really good.
Yeah. And another is there are 2 different things I went to at the NOC speech place. It's been a while, but could I still write on them? Because I remember one was the guy who worked under George Bush during the 9/11 thing. He said, I was there. He had to like keep everything.
Oh yeah.
I remember that guy. I'm gonna have to look up what he was and then like write about it again.
Yeah, he was Andrew Card.
Yeah.
I think was his name. He was Bush's chief of staff.
Chief of staff.
Yeah.
That's the word. Okay.
Yeah, Andrew Card, I think was the guy's name. Yeah.
Because I really enjoyed his speech, and then would it be okay if I still wrote about that?
Yeah, sure.
And also about the spies from
the CIA agent.
family thing, because that was pretty cool too.
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, I know you. I know you're a good student, and I figured you just, I don't know, something came up and you
totally didn't think about that. And
I would have let you make it up if you'd done it then, but yeah, if you're willing to do some extra credit for it, I'll certainly accept it.
All right, thank you.
Sure. See you, Scott.
See you.